All right, so let's talk about how to screen for if the girl is what we call DTF, down to fuck, basically, right? What is her level of sexual likelihood, sexual compliance, that sort of a thing. And in day games specifically, I want you to think about two separate categories of this. One is like her down to fuckness, but understand that usually in day game, if you're gonna get a same night or same day, same evening lay from the daytime, it's going to usually be a series of events. It's usually gonna be meet her, venue change her, and then venue change her home, or even venue change multiple times. It's usually not going to be straight from the street to your house, just because buying temperature tends to build more slowly in daytime. So the high percentage way to do it is typically the slower route. So you want to think, how down is she to have sex in general, but also how down is she for that first venue change? Because understand that once that first venue change happens, everything changes, right? Once she's come with you and had that 45-minute like sit down coffee or smoothie or meal with you or whatever, all of a sudden now she does know you well, she's had an extended interaction with you, she may actually be willing to blow off a lot of plans for you, or she may be willing to change her plans, change her day for you. So know that, yeah, you want to look at the whole spectrum, can you get from A to Z, but don't restrict yourself just because you don't think you can get from A to Z and not try all the steps in between. And understand that even if the girl doesn't sleep with you right then and there that day, if you do get from, say, A to N or halfway to Z or whatever, you get the venue change and you don't get her all the way home, you've made the number a lot more solid than it would have been had you not gotten the venue change, so it's still a positive thing. Okay, so think of DTF screening, down to fuck screening, but also think of like DTVC screening if you want to, down to venue change, right? How likely is she to do that? And that factors in as well. So the first thing you want to look at is the girl's inherent situation and inherent personality. Okay, just as a quick overview, we're basically going to look at inherent situation and personality. Then we're going to look at her reaction and response to you in terms of telling from there where you're at and how likely things are to go well. And then we're going to finish off by talking about sort of how you can not be completely constrained by what she's at coming in, like what her life history is or what her predisposition towards having sex same day is, how you can actually start to influence it, how you can start to, as you're figuring it out, sort of guide it down the route to working in your favor. Okay, so that's kind of the outline for what we're going to do. But first, looking at her inherent situation, first thing is logistics and group situation. Logistics basically means, location and transportation, time, factors like that. How likely is it she can go home with you? So if she's on her way to work and she has 2 minutes before she has to be there and she's running late, well, that's pretty difficult because she doesn't know you that well yet. She has a serious obligation and there's a serious consequence to her if she were to renege on that obligation. If she were to not go to work, that's a serious problem for her. So in that situation, it's going to be very unlikely situationally that she's going to be able to have sex with you same day, right? Here's a group situation that seems very unlikely that she'll have sex same day is, let's say she's with her mother, 2 sisters, aunt, and father, right? In that situation, it's going to be very hard for her to just blow up, but bye family, I'm going to go fuck this guy now. It's not very likely because it's a group of people she knows very, very well, a group of people that have sort of an inherent perception of her, that sort of thing, people that will be very protective of her and be very unlikely to let her go, that kind of stuff. So a girl by herself doing nothing for the day is obviously a much more likely candidate. Okay, so logistics, what are you looking for? You're looking for if she has her day free, that's ideal. If you say what are you doing right this exact second, as I mentioned in some of the other modules, and she says, well, I don't really know, I'm free for a bit, I don't know, I got off work early and I kind of have the rest of the day, that in your mind should automatically be ding, 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 we have a winner, right? Might as well be a bullseye, she's down. Other ones are oh, I'm on vacation, I just exploring, oh, golden. Absolutely golden, because she has her day free, and also the vacation thing, which we'll talk about in a minute, is very, very good. On the other hand, if it's oh, I'm on my way to work, I'm in a rush, that's not so good. Or if it's I have this other obligation in an hour, maybe you have a venue change, talk, get a solid number, but that does make the whole pulling in the daytime thing much less likely. Okay, so that's a factor. In terms of the group situation, obviously alone is the best because no one there to judge her, has total freedom. If she's with a group of a few people, then that can be kind of difficult because she is unlikely to leave them because they might feel it is rude to them to leave. If she's with a group of a bunch of people, then she may actually have the possibility to leave. Although typically groups in daytime will be prohibitively difficult. You won't usually pull them. I do have the one set that I show you guys where I pull the 2 set. And in that case, what do? I actually recruited a wingman for the other girl. And you could definitely do that, especially if you have other things going on. If you know where a place where a lot of your friends are, recruit the whole group to that place, that could work. Or if you just have a friend who has a cool place that you could invite them back to, and they can all have a good time, and then you isolate, that kind of thing can work. But usually the logistics in a daytime situation are a big factor there. So when you're talking about pulling a girl in the daytime, usually you're looking at a girl who's alone or has a possibility to be alone shortly. That's a very, very critical factor in terms of the group. Beyond that, if the group is sort of loosely affiliated, she doesn't know them that well, she might be able to leave the group. If the group is some people she knows very, very well, who she has a long history with and are likely to judge her, that's going to be much less likely that she'll be able to go. So that's something to screen for. And again, as I mentioned all these things, I don't want you to be that guy that's like, oh, the situation isn't good to pull, so let me leave the interaction. Understand, it's totally good to get numbers, it's totally good to follow up, all that kind of stuff. So don't be so like pull or nothing, especially in the daytime. But it is good to know where things are likely to go. Okay, so that's a little bit on logistics, a little bit on group. Other things with logistics, how close does she live? Especially if you don't live close. If you live like a block away, her logistics might not matter that much. But if you're especially like, traveling around, or you're in a different part of the city than you normally are, and you happen to see her randomly, if she lives a block away, well, all of a sudden, walking back to her place and having like, a drink there or something like that is a very good premise to get her home. If you both live 45 minutes away from the place you're at, now it's a much more difficult situation. Still, obviously, you can do the venue change, build a lot of comfort and getting to know her and get a lot of attention, getting her chasing, and then anything can happen. But it's not going to be as good of a situation. Okay, so you're looking for that kind of stuff. Other minor logistical factors are things like, does she have roommates, is she what is her time frame for later? What is she doing the next day? Those kind of things all add up. But basically, you're just gauging the feasibility of her going with you. So that's the logistical and group factor. I think you kind of understand that one, hopefully fairly innately, and you can logic your way through that. Next, though, is you can look at her situation, not in terms of the literal situation that she's in, but look at the attitude of her situation. Okay, for example, if a girl has all day and doesn't have specific obligations, but she lives in the city, she's running errands, and she feels very busy, and she feels those are important errands, and she's like on a schedule, she technically still has all day free because she could blow off those errands without terrible consequences. But she's much more in that mode of like, I am logical, focused in my life, etc. Same girl, when she's on vacation and has all day free, even if she had an itinerary for vacation, she's much more likely a lot of times to break that because she's in an adventurous, outgoing, expansive, like let's do something crazy type of a mood, right? So understand that the situation affects what she can literally do, but it also affects her mood, and that's a key factor as well. The next inherent factor to screening for how down a girl is going to be her personal history, okay? Let's face it, some girls have sex more than others. Some girls are more open to sex than others. Some girls have different restrictions and different thresholds, right? I've met certain girls that have, been with lots and lots of guys, and they've had lots of one-night stands, and they think like sex is a wonderful thing, and they're very open about it. If you like say sex is a negative, they'll actually stand up and openly defend it, be like, no, sex is a beautiful thing, etc. On the other hand, I've met girls that are virgins. And I've met girls that have been with, 3 guys in their lifetime, and all of them they knew for a year before sleeping with them. Obviously, that factors in. The girl's personal sexual history is key. So you can start to gauge for that, and you can start to ask questions along those lines. Or better yet, instead of asking questions, you can sort of tell personal stories about yourself or friends that imply certain things and see how she responds to those. So that's a key part of it. The other key part of it is not just her sexual liberalism, but also how open she is to adventure, taking risks, that kind of stuff in general. So for example, a girl that's lived in a small town, had her same group of friends her whole life, hasn't traveled much, has had very few sexual partners, is going to be very unlikely in general to go with you same day because she's used to an environment where she's being judged and she's playing by the rules and she feels a lot of restrictions. On the other hand, a girl who's lived in big cities, has traveled a lot, in particular maybe has traveled alone, those kind of things, is going to be much more open to having an adventure, doing something a little risky. If a girl's backpack through Europe by herself, she's not as scared about going and having coffee or going back to a stranger's place as a girl who's been sheltered her whole life and is afraid to afraid to hold hands. So you need to gauge her personal history as well in terms of that. So with that, you're looking for, has she traveled? Is she adventurous? History with alcohol, like does she drink or not? That's a big factor. Does she live in a big city or a small town? Those are typical factors you're looking for. Again, and what you're looking for a girl to be down in terms of attitude is general adventurousness and willingness to take risks. If she seems super conservative and uptight, doesn't mean she won't be a candidate for you to sleep with one way or another. It just means she's less likely to have sex with you on the first day from day game. It doesn't mean it's impossible either, though. I have had wonderful pulls with some girls that were very traditional. So it's not impossible, but again, it's swimming upstream instead of swimming downstream. It's just harder when the current's not in your favor. Beyond factors inherent to the girl herself, you should also be looking at how the interaction is going with her. Because a girl who, screens out is very down to fuck in general. She's very adventurous. She's been with lots of guys. She's traveled by herself. She enjoys alcohol, that kind of stuff. But just doesn't like you that much is not very likely to go with you same day. On the other hand, a girl who's very conservative, if she likes you enough and is very compliant to you and is very in your frame, who knows, that actually could happen. So you want to be screening how well the set is going. And a lot of people do this wrong. A lot of people screen the set based on how much the girl's giggling or how talkative the girl is. And that could just be, first of all, buying temper does not equate directly to sex. It's a tool to get the other things that lead to sex. And then how talkative the girl is may just mean she's an outgoing, friendly girl versus a shy girl. And a lot of times the girl that's really down, even if she is talkative, she'll clam up because she's starting to be intimidated by you. She's starting to be overwhelmed by how cool you are. And so she'll actually become just quiet and attentive and not talk that much. So a lot of guys are looking for the wrong factors. And basically, there are 3 factors you want to be looking for in order to tell how down the girl is. First is compliance, which is if you ask something, how likely is she to go along with it? Next is qualification, meaning is she proving herself to you or attempting to prove herself to you? And the third is re-engagement. If you leave a silence or if you pull away or you ignore her for a minute or do something, does she start the conversation again? Is she sort of afraid of losing the conversation? Will she fill the silence or fill the social gap? Right? And a good way to test for this is just be quiet. So first, let's look at compliance. Compliance basically means if you ask the girl for something, how likely is she to do it? There was an old phrase or old idea in the pickup community, which I kind of like in principle, which is if you say, hey, come here to a girl and beckon her, and she comes over, then you have no excuse not to sleep with her. That's a bit of an oversimplification, but it is kind of true that all compliance is the same thing. It's just a matter of degree. Right? If she'll comply to one thing, she likes you, that means your whole job is just create a compliance ladder, spend your time, get her to comply to more and more things until eventually she's complying to sex. So it's that decision to comply that is super, super critical. And if you think of it, sex just is a form of compliance. It's a let's fuck, okay, sure. Right? It is a high form of compliance. So you want to be testing for compliance very early on little things. Right? You can be like, hey, you know what? Let's just go sit over here. There's a lot of people walking by. Or you can, just reach out and touch the girl's shoulder and see if she's okay with it. Or even a physical, like shake her hand, even a man-to-woman handshake, turn it, upwards instead of business handshake. Different things like that are good tests for where you're at, right? Another form of compliance that's actually very subtle is if you assert a frame. If you make a strong point in the conversation, notice if she fights that frame or if she just goes along with it, especially if it's something that is a little controversial or something that she might not have agreed to. Especially if she seems hesitant but then goes along with it, that's a good sign that she's complying to your frames. The more that's happening, the more she is bending her normal personality to suit you and to suit making the conversation good with you, the better situation you're in. So look for that. Next is qualifying herself. This is something we talk about a ton in game in general, but if she's trying to prove herself to you, you're in really good shape. It means that you're in the role of being the buyer and she's in the role of the seller. It means you're the selective, high-value person with options, which is the role you really want to be in. So, number one, notice when she's qualifying to you, but number two, you can start qualifying her. You can overtly qualify. Hey, are you adventurous? Hey, you know what? You seem smart, but I can't really tell. Like, did you go to college or are you self-taught? Do you read? What's the last book you read? Right? And she starts thinking, oh no, I'm really smart. I've done this, this, and this. Or, oh no, I'm totally into that. Or I'm totally artsy. As soon as she starts qualifying, you're in really good shape. And especially if you can just keep that going, now you've created a situation, this is very big, where if she ends up sleeping with you, it's a win for her instead of a loss. Does that make sense? So if you are the whole time selling and selling and selling to her, and she eventually is like, okay, I give in, she may give in, you may have sex, but she's gonna feel like she gave in and like it felt good, but she's not like made better as a human being for it. However, if she starts qualifying herself to you, justifying, and you're like, oh, well, I'm not so sure. Oh, actually, you're pretty cool. Now she feels like she won you over. She feels like having sex with you is actually validating her and making her cooler as a person rather than making her more slutty or less cool or less, societally correct or whatever. Okay, so qualification is absolutely huge. And the last one's re-engagement. And obviously it just comes down to if she likes you and there's a silence, she'll feel the silence is awkward. She won't want to lose you, right? Or if you push away or ignore her for a minute, does she jump back on? Another subtle form of re-engagement is does she jump back onto old conversational topics? Like if she doesn't have anything to say, or if a conversational topic goes dead and she's kind of like at a loss, is she afraid of losing the conversation? Will she go back and say dumb stuff just to keep it going? Okay, so look at re-engagement. Another thing is if you happen to be, maybe you're with a wingman gaming, or you're out with a group of people, or you're doing something day gamey but like kind of in a social environment like a barbecue or a picnic or something like that. Notice if she seems to like keep gravitating around you, find herself near you over and over again. If she joins in your conversation like here and there where she doesn't really have to, obviously those are really, really good signs that she's chasing. And if she is re-engaging, she's pretty down in terms of as a person. Okay, so we've kind of looked at two different factors. Again, we've looked at, well, maybe three. We've looked at her logistical situation and friend situation, right? Then we've looked at her personality and history, which is a big factor. And then we've looked at how much does she like you? How much is she responding to you? So those are the three factors that we're trying to look for. But ideally, we'd like to even go beyond just looking at them and beyond just screening for them and start manipulating them. Start actually changing them in our favor. And there are a couple ways that we can do that. The first thing you can do to put a girl more into her, we'll call it her down to fuck attitude. Because think of it this way. Think of every girl as having sort of two different selves. She has her conservative self and her adventurous self. And her conservative self is like, I better not do that. I might get judged. He might think I'm a slut. That could be risky. Her adventurous self is saying like, I'm turned on. This is hot. This is fun. Let's go with it. Let's have adventures. Let's make stories, right? Obviously, you want to motivate her to be more in her adventurous self if you want to have same-day lays. So how do you motivate that? Well, the first part is to convey that you are in adventurous mode and that you won't be judgmental. So how can you do that? Well, you can tell stories about times when you did adventurous things and it worked out really well. Or you can tell stories about your friends if you want to distance it from you a little bit. Tell stories about your friends and some crazy things that they've done and show that you thought it was really cool and you didn't really judge. Okay, so you want to be conveying these types of things. Right? You want to have that inherent in the conversation. Right? You can also play what if with her. You play what if this, what if that, what if the other. And so what you're doing in all these cases, by the way, is you're bringing up all these fun, adventurous, crazy topics, but you're doing it in a way that you're faultless. You're doing it in a way that it's not pushy, it's not needy, it's not try hard. It's not like you're trying to talk about sex all the time or trying to like say like we should have sex. Instead you're talking about, oh, you know what's so funny? My friend did this thing with this girl one time and I thought it was hilarious. And at first I was like, what the fuck? But then I thought about it and I'm like, you know what? That's really fucking cool. I actually really respect him for that. I actually really respect the girl for being like that adventurous. I know that's a girl that's like, she's gonna live a life where when she's 80 years old, she's gonna look back and be like, I had a fucking good life, right? Whereas some other girls would be like, I had to stick up my ass all life, right? So you can screen with your attitude, right? You can screen by what you judge, what you don't judge. Also, you can screen by what you judge and don't judge in her. So when you're qualifying a girl, obviously you want to find some cool things about her. Obviously you want to occasionally disqualify to keep the tension. So, but if you're qualifying, if the girl says, you know, I've gotten straight A's my whole life and I've never turned a paper in late and I've never missed a day of class, is that conservative self or is that adventurous self? That's definitely conservative self. So if you say to her about that, oh, that's really cool, I really admire that about you. Now she's like, oh shit, he likes my conservative self. And she's gonna then bring out her conservative self around you a lot, right? If on the other hand, you're like, well, that's kind of cool, I guess, but on the same time, like live a little. Seriously, like you've never missed a day of class. You should just ditch school just one time just to prove that you can do it, right? So when you're screening her, and when you're qualifying her, qualify in a way that leads her towards the more adventurous. Let her know that you like the girl to be more adventurous. I remember one really cool example that I had. I was on an instant date with a girl, and I said to her, what's the most, let's say either what's the worst thing you've ever done or the most trouble you've ever been in? And at that moment she got like really scared because she didn't want to like say the wrong thing and she was nervous. And so I softened it a little bit. I said that you are willing to tell a guy you've known for 15 minutes. And she kind of loosened up. She's like, oh, great question. But then she sat there for about 30 seconds with no answer, just an awkward silence. And the reason she sat there was she didn't know what to tell me. She didn't know whether I would be impressed by her conservative side or her adventurous side. She didn't want to say something that seemed super slutty or super like crazy and maybe like, oh my God, who the fuck are you? She also didn't want to say something that's super conservative and I'd be like, God, you're fucking boring. So she sat there in silence for 30 seconds and I said, and if you tell me that you once turned a paper in late, like that's the most adventurous thing you've ever done, then I'm leaving. Right? And then, so at that point, she told me this crazy story, and it led to really, really good things. Okay, so you want to make sure that as you're going through this qualification process, as you are getting compliance, as you're doing all those things, you want to make sure you have the right attitude, and you're instilling that right attitude with her. You also want to make sure that you are screening towards the right stuff. Okay, so qualify in the right way, screen in the right way, and convey that you have no judgment, and all of this will get much easier. Okay, so that's a little bit about not only how to screen a girl for how down she is, how available she is, how well you're doing, and how on it is, but then also how to motivate that. So take this information and along with good general carriage, if you're a cool guy already and you know how to escalate, if you add this in, it's going to supercharge your game and take you to the next level.